And equal protection is a basic right under the United States Constitution. Something as basic as the right of free speech, the right of an accused criminal, for example, to be presumed innocent. Would anyone like to guess what equal protection means? Okay, yes.
Well, Steve, I would take the guess. I mean, I'm just going to take the simplistic approach that equal protection means that everyone is protected equally. I would guess that that's what it means, and I guess that means that there be no discrimination should be directed against any one person. That no one person should be treated differently than any other person.
Okay, that actually is amazingly good, and congratulations, being great. Yeah, so we're going to hone in on the definition, but that's a great start. Wonderful. Before we go further in discussing what equal protection means, where in the United States Constitution is equal protection mentioned? Well, first of all, the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution requires that state and local governments may not deny any person the equal protection of the laws. Also, the 5th Amendment of the Constitution requires that the federal government may not deny any person the equal protection of the laws. Therefore, between the 5th and the 14th Amendments, no level of government, whether it be the local, state, or federal government, may take away equal protection. All levels of government must make sure equal protection or equal protection of the laws is given to everyone. And incidentally, the 14th Amendment mentions equal protection by name. Amazingly, the 5th Amendment does not. However, at least since the year 1954, and in that year there was a Supreme Court decision saying that the due process provision, which is included in the 5th Amendment, also includes the concept of equal protection. Therefore, by Supreme Court interpretation, both the 5th and 14th Amendments include equal protection, and no level of government can take it away from any person. Now, equal protection requires that absent sufficient justification, the government must treat similarly situated people alike. And we'll be looking at many examples of exactly what that means. Equal protection also means that discrimination is unconstitutional and therefore illegal. And notice I have the word illegal in all capital letters. The reason for that is that if something is unconstitutional, it is always illegal, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary. Therefore, if Congress passed a law saying that we're no longer going to have equal protection, or if a state or local government passed a law that was inconsistent with what equal protection requires, all of those other laws would be void and unenforceable, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any other law you have to yield to it. So, under equal protection, discrimination is unconstitutional and therefore always illegal, assuming two conditions are met. And I list them here. Let's actually discuss them in the opposite of the order that I list them. One condition is that the discrimination must be unfair. Now, you might be thinking that sounds redundant. If it's discrimination, obviously, by definition, it's unfair. But, well, let's look at a couple of examples and see what we think. Let's suppose someone is denied a basic right because of their ethnic background. How many of you think it's fair? Okay, I'm glad no one raised it. How many of you think that it's unfair? Okay, unanimous, and that's a very obvious example. But let's take another example. The government actually gives food stamps to poor people only. In a sense, that's discrimination against the rich people. They don't get the food stamps. Now, how many of you think that the food stamp discrimination, which I just described, is fair? Okay, sure. In fact, it's just about unanimous the other way. Does anyone want to argue that it's unfair? Okay, so you see, certain types of different treatment of groups or discrimination against groups might actually be justified, at least in most people's minds. To violate equal protection, the discrimination needs to be unfair. Okay, so that's one requirement. The other requirement is that the discrimination has to come from the government. So let's suppose that one goes to Denny's restaurant clearly a private business not run by the government and is discriminated against. Can Denny's do that? The answer is, of course not. There are other laws that protect against private discrimination. However, equal protection really does, in fact, require government discrimination. So it does not violate the constitutional requirement of equal protection, but it does violate other laws, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and various other federal, state, and local laws. Now, all of these three sets of laws are very important to protect against some very serious and illegal private discrimination. However, the focus of the lecture today is going to be on equal protection. Okay? Now, equal protection bans many types of unfair discrimination by the government, including discrimination based on race, national origin, religion, citizenship status, or what the law often calls alienage, gender, wealth, age, disability, often called exceptionality, and sexual orientation, among others. Now, I say among others, this list is not exhaustive, and for example, if the government were to unfairly discriminate against someone based on their hair color, that's not on the list, but that certainly could potentially raise an equal protection claim as well. However, most of the cases seem to be in one of these areas. So these are the common areas, but this is not an exhaustive list of possible types of discrimination that will be covered by equal protection. All right? Well, that's a brief introduction to equal protection. That's the end of part one. We're going to look at some very specific examples in part two. I just wonder if anyone has any questions before we move on to the next part. Okay? So let's have the computer whisk us into part two.
Oh, nice effect.
Okay. Well, thank you. And part two deals with Supreme Court cases on equal protection. And we're going to do this from a historical perspective, starting with the cases that come earliest in the history of our country, moving up slowly and chronologically up to the present day. And we'll also throw in a few other historic events other than the Supreme Court cases that also are relevant as they occurred chronologically. Okay? Now, before we proceed any further, in just a moment, I'm going to have you read on your handout the directions, which are in bold-faced type on the center of page 1. And then read everything that follows the directions on page 1, as well as all of page 2. And while you do this, you will be following the directions, which I'll paraphrase for you right now. Most of what you'll be reading has to do with Supreme Court cases on equal protection. Each case starts with the name of the case. And by each case name, there's a blank space on both the before the case name and after the case name. The before the case name on the left and after the case name on the right. At this time, you're going to just fill in the blank before the case name on the left. Use either F and mark an F if you believe that the discrimination described is fair. The letter U if you believe the discrimination described is unfair. And basically choose one of those two options. Then, later we'll discuss each case, and then you'll mark F or U depending on whether the Supreme Court determined that it was fair or unfair. So leave the right side blank for now, just fill in the left side. Are there any questions about the direction? All right, let's take up to about 10 minutes, depending on how much time you need, and then we'll resume. Thank you.
How much do you want us to fill out, Steve?
Fill out the left side